I know nothing about him or all the other siblings. But I think it would be to your advantage if you would get in touch with Aunt Rose Bone, because she remembers the cousins. I'm not sure if she was, no. In 1935, we lived in a very small town called Caro, Michigan, C-A-R-O. And my father had a very small business of used cars and auto parts, and we were just creeping out from a very bad depression, which continued even after that. The year 1935 was the year that I graduated from high school, June 1935. My mother and father, neither of them ever went back to Europe. So my mother persuaded my dad to go see his family and her family. Well, it took all the money that they could scrape together, and my dad left. I think he went on the boat. I do have some postcards that he wrote. I think the sea vessel was called Normandy. No, I don't remember. Anyway, he got to Europe, and I think in that book that we have, there is a picture of him visiting Uncle Nandor, Uncle Nathan, and his family. And my dad is there on the side, and I think there's their goat. And it looks like it's in front of a barn. I think there's haystacks or bales of straw. It's very vague in my memory, but I know that my dad helped wherever he could, and he had a house built for one of my uncles, one of my mother's brothers or sister, and he just did what he could, and they too were ignorant of the suffering in the other parts of Europe. And unfortunately, they were all taken. So there was sadness in our life, and we just had to hear stories. But Rosie knows so many of them, and I'm not sure. I don't think she was in Europe in 35. No, of course not. So when it was time for my father to return, incidentally, to go back to the store, I was the mother of the household because my mother helped in the store, and I had to look after the kids. I was 18 years old, not quite. And anyway, when my dad came back, I think perhaps a month later, he got as far as New York, and in New York he called my mother, send money. I haven't got enough for a ticket from New York to Michigan. My mother couldn't understand it, but she did. She sent him whatever it was, I don't know. And he got home, with nothing but a tiny suitcase and a change of clothes. He left everything with my mother's family. So, can you imagine one set of clothes and what he had on his back? He had spent everything. Well, that was a happy thing for my parents to do. When he came back, my mother did pretty good business. And people would come in, they needed a used part, a tire, a gasket, steering wheel, have a glass repaired and installed, and she did quite well. And that was part of my mother's genius things that she did. If I would get into her cooking, it would take me too long. She was a wonderful, wonderful cook, and we all appreciated her food and her baking, and she still baked and cooked the Hungarian European way. In fact, plus that, she became very American, and she studied reading it. She'd pick up anything to read and to educate herself from day to day better. Her English was already pretty good. Let me see. I told you about my dad's trip in Europe, and my mother was so sincere in wanting to help your brothers and you, Herman, and Hugo, to get educated, and she just would put the homework, my sister's and my brother's homework in front of them, in front of him, and they would ask him to help him with their homework when they would explain. Well, he was pretty good in a lot of subjects, but there were things that he didn't want to discuss, like geography or what. Do you remember, Herman? I don't remember if you were in the Army, but I remember seeing a picture of you like in an officer's uniform, and you had like jodhpurs on with leather leggings. Am I right? And another thing, sad, when my father passed away, his 65th year, at his funeral, of course, you and Hugo were there. I'm not sure if you were a pallbearer, but after the ceremony, on our going to the cemetery, nobody saw Hugo and called, "Hugo, where's Hugo?" And there were so many people and so many cars. We thought maybe he fell in one of the cars with the cousins. But no, he didn't. Hugo ran away from the funeral and hid. The funeral was kind of way out in the outskirts. He hid someplace in a tree-lane little forest, and it was after no one found him, my parents had to go and have police looking. Well, they found him, and they brought him home. And they questioned him, not with malice, but with kindness. "Why did you do that?" "You know, it was a respect to Uncle Joe." And he started to cry, and he said, I had my reason, because everybody that was good to me and everybody that I loved left me. It was a very, very touching few moments in our house. We were joyful that he was fine and helping out. I really don't know. I think I told you the story about the bicycle. Shortly before Hugo came, Sam bought a Schwinn bike, unassembled, brand new, and it came from a different state. And our son Lenny was too young, too small, but things were rationed and it was very, very hard to purchase. Money was scarce, but somehow or other he ordered this bike, and it was just standing in the box, unassembled. So, lo and behold, we said, you know, it's going to be a few years before Lenny's going to be able to ride this bike. So, put it together, and we gave it to Hugo. Well, Hugo was he was so happy. And he would cruise around the neighborhood. And I don't know, he went out the neighborhood limits, and for some reason a policeman stopped him and asked for his ID. Well, at the time, I don't know what he had. He must have had something that he'd lived with my parents. And that was an experience that we always laughed about. Eventually, and you know, it's really something, Herman and Leslie, that you became the czar of bicycles. Did that story have influenced you in any way? I would like to think so. He would take that bike and do a little shopping for my mother just in the neighborhood, and he did spend a lot of time with my mom. And my mother's, you know, siblings were your uncles and aunts.